Welcome to Philanthropy Impact's Walk in My Shoes members series, which is carefully curated as a resource to support you as you help clients to navigate the philanthropy and impact investment space. My name is Hamzahee, and I'm the Director of Membership and Development here at Philanthropy Impact, and the person to talk to if you'd like to know more about our training and how to make the most of your membership. I'll share my email in the chat or at the end of this session for those watching the recording. Today, we want to take this moment of our last Walk in My Shoes of 2021 to celebrate the positive strides taken collectively this year towards creating the society we want to build. I welcome our CEO, John Pepin, as the chair for this session, and joining him, I'm really pleased to introduce our panel, who will all be able to speak at a different perspective on what's been happening. So joining him, we have Patricia Hamzahee, who is the founder of Integriti Capital, director at Extend Ventures, and co-founder of the Black Funding Network. We also welcome Brian Heyworth, who's the managing partner at Lansdowne Partners, and for his debut with us, Edward Garrett, head of private clients at Charities Aid Foundation. As we keep these discussions strictly to 30 minutes, they go really quickly, but we encourage audience interaction, especially today. Please use the chat to introduce yourselves, have your say, and pose questions to our panel. Please make sure to select everyone when posting in the chat so that everyone can see. That's my intro done, so thank you all for joining us today, and I'll now hand over to John to make a start. Thanks, John.
Well, thank you very much. As the last one, we thought it would be really interesting to review this last year and a half or so. This is over 60 Walk in My Shoes. We put out a magazine recently called What Kind of Society We Want to Build, 42 articles. What was really impressive was how positive people were about trying to bring change in their realms of influence. So it was really good. The question is about whether we're going back to the old normal, creating the new normal, and the magazine writers seem to say we want a new normal. So I would ask each one of you if you could introduce yourselves, and then I'm going to start asking you a couple of questions. So Edward, do you want to start off?
Thanks, John. Great to be here. Hi, I'm Ed Garrett. I'm the head of private clients at CAF, the Charities Aid Foundation. We're a donor-advised fund in part. The CAF group offers services across the third sector to charities and donors. And as a donor-advised fund, we facilitate giving for some of the UK and the world's major donors, helping them to maximize the impact of their capital and move it all around the world to the beneficiaries that they want to support.
Thank you, Ed. Patricia.
Hello, everyone. Nice to join you today. I am a advisor. I work with social enterprises and investors looking to invest in social change. I'm also an impact investor myself and a philanthropist. So I look at the issues that we might be talking about today through different lenses, and hopefully, can share some of my experiences and expertise in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Brian Heyworth. I'm the co-managing partner of Lansdowne Partners, which is a equity investment boutique. And I'm also chairman of a wonderful organization called the City Mental Health Alliance.
Thank you. So Ed, just recently CAF has produced this giving report. What are some of the implications of what was in the report? So for example, a year and a half ago, the median gift was about £4,000 for high net worth, ultra high net worth. Has there been a change? Is it getting better? Is it what's happening?
Thanks, John. Yeah, so the giving report is the country's largest study of giving behaviour. CAF's been running it since about 2004 and tracking giving in the UK for since then. It's conducted on a monthly basis, surveying somewhere in the region of 10 to 15,000 respondents across each year. So it gives a really granular picture of changes in giving behaviour. It combined with the intelligence we've got from, and it's largely focused at sort of at the more retail end of the charitable giving spectrum, but combined with data we've got from the donor advised fund and major donors, we've got a pretty comprehensive picture of trends in the market. A few to pick out. fewer donors giving more. So the number of retail donors has significantly dropped in the past, during the course of the pandemic. But those who are continuing to give tend to be giving a lot more. That's probably no surprise as a result of the impact of the pandemic on fundraising activities on the ground. And that's fed into the other kind of big trend we've seen in terms of the way people are giving, that cash donations have significantly dwindled, and online and digital giving has kind of taken up in that. Although overall the volume of giving in terms of the number of people giving hasn't increased back to pre-pandemic levels. That's the kind of data from the report, coupled with some of the data from our donor advised fund, major donors. We've certainly seen a significant increase over the course of the pandemic from major donors in terms of the values of the gifts they're making. I think that speaks to, unfortunately, perhaps increased inequality in terms of those who have capacity to give. Major donors, a lot of major donors are feeling that from the course of the pandemic, they still have the capacity and indeed have an increased capacity to give. But I think the other big thing, so that's some of the kind of trends around the actual giving from donors, but I think the other big thing that the report has shown, which is a really positive sign for the years ahead, is that trust in charities has significantly improved. It was well documented that trust in charities was declining up to 2018. And through to 2020 and 2021, we've seen that those trust levels increase again significantly. And I think that's vindication for the role that charities have performed in stepping in to respond to the crisis. And that, coupled with the level of giving from major donors, for us paints a really optimistic picture about the role of philanthropy in the society that we are seeking to build moving forward.
As the report, you said fewer people are giving more. Does that apply to mass affluent, high net worth, and ultra high net worth, or is it primarily mass affluent?
That data certainly points to the sort of mass affluent bracket. And as I say, for those in the donor advised fund that really serves the high net worth and ultra high net worth demographic, we are seeing record inflows of capital in terms of the values, and also the number of new client inquiries that we're receiving. So I think there is a distinct divide across those demographics that you've kind of alluded to there, of those who have the capacity and those perhaps who are viewing the pandemic and the fallout from it as a point to consider their options in terms of how much liquid capital or excess capital they've got to dedicate to giving.
Thank you. Patricia, what are the implications of this? And I know that you've instituted some research which is not completed yet. And what are some of the highlights that may be emerging from that, and how does it relate back to this report?
Right. So sort of we wanted to, the group I'm with, wanted to take a look at a subset of Edward's cohort, in the sense that we were really concerned on the back of what we anticipated would be a great hit amongst specifically Black-led charities in the COVID era, as well as sort of the step up of work that was happening following the Black Lives Matter and the George Floyd murder, etc. We knew that there was going to be a lot of focus on Black-led nonprofit, Black-led charities, and where and how and where those would be funded. And we determined, we really worked hard to kind of get underway a research, which we have just started, it's completed, but we're just starting the analysis, to value specifically intentional giving to the Black community by Black philanthropists themselves, those people who have financial means to donate. We have seen sporting stars like Marcus Rashford and music stars like Stormzy step up and give to support causes that are very close to their heart in terms of social and racial justice. And we really wanted to get a handle on what that looks like. How do we in the Black community give? Why do we give? To what do we give? And specifically also to what we don't give to. So we commissioned some research that we've done with the support of UCL. And again, that's coming out. I would say, and it's a very qualitative research. We have done interviews with high net worth individuals. I guess in the CAF universe, that would probably be more, sort of seen as major donors, even though some of them are very high net worth. And we also did focus groups. So we did focus groups with people who do give, and we did focus groups with Black-led organizations that receive funding, and sort of how do they see the landscape of funding from grants and funding from donations from the Black community itself. And it is very illuminating. Again, I hope we will be able to do much more research into this area, because it is so not understood, well understood, not tracked, not really, the investment in this space is really needed. But I think just the top line insights that we've gained are quite interesting. And I suppose very specifically, just speaking again, sporting stars, music stars, but also successful entrepreneurs who are noted for being themselves at a high net worth level. Many of them feel quite precarious, so that in the backdrop against perhaps some of the universe that CAF are looking at, where there's family wealth and inherited wealth, etc. Amongst our cohort, even though they are, they would be seen to be financially well off and do give, to certain things that are very important to them, but give against a backdrop of a bit of precariousness. So that in a way colors a lot of the kind of exploration that we were trying to do about how to sustain Black-led organizations from our own resources, so that rather than being recipients of charity from the mainstream, and having to go through what are perceived by some of the organizations as a lot of hoops and a lot of really sort of for under-resourced organizations, really demanding processes, trying to cultivate our own pool of support. So yeah, it's proven interesting. I can't wait to be able to share it with everybody when it's ready. But it provides a lot of food for thought, and I hope will really encourage a more detailed investigation as well.
When you doing the research, you're focusing, you're saying on Black philanthropists, existing and I assume potential.
Yeah.
Are you seeing from the other end, from mainstream philanthropists, wealthy people, addressing the racial equity, social racial justice issues, and are they doing it in a way that where the power imbalance is being addressed by unrestricted funding?
So I think we have seen, given what I said about the impact, disproportionate impacts of things like COVID, and obviously, some of the impetus out of the Black Lives Matter movement. Yes, I think we are seeing the willingness to investigate and look at what supporting racial justice can and should look like. So I do think that there has been maybe not universally, but amongst a good number of people questioning how could they do better in this area, what can they do? And I guess the big question is, what can they do? There's a lot of trepidation, right? There's a lot of people want to do more. But they are nervous. They are spending a lot of time trying to do things in the right ways. Taking that time, I would encourage people more and more to get support and collaborate with people, from the community, so that they have a good understanding of what sort of real support and real allyship looks like. I think collaboration and cooperation is really important here. But I do see a shift. I will say that the power imbalance is talked about, people understand that it does exist, I do think there still needs to be much more done to kind of bring the real dynamics to the fore, and people really taking hard looks at themselves and their processes, and yeah, just the representation they afford and the decision making and all of that. There's a lot still to do, but I think the important thing is that the conversations have started. I mean, finally, I'm going to say I've been in this country 33 years, doing lots of things. Finally, we are talking about race. We're talking about very specific issues that have been not necessarily part of the conversation in the past.
Great, thank you very much. Brian, you're dealing with issues from a different perspective. Can you talk a bit about the whole area of mental health, its implications, and what the city is doing to start to address those, and maybe talk a tiny bit about your own history and stuff, because I think it's quite relevant.
Sure. So I think it follows on quite neatly from Patricia's last points, which I as a younger man had difficulties with mental health. Now is not the time to go into that, but that has very much helped me frame my my involvement in this topic. I was hospitalized in 2006, and looking back, was struggling, a lot as a younger man. So enough about me, but the City Mental Health Alliance was set up about 10 years ago. Initially, it started off with a few senior executives in the city meeting up to talk about their own difficulties, but with some amazing partners and an amazing chief executive, a wonderful lady called Poppy Jaman, Jaman. There's a lot of information on our website. This organization has flourished in the last 5 to 7 years. Going into the pandemic at the beginning of last year, we had about 20 members in the UK. We're now up to 37, and it's many of the biggest companies in the city of London. So big law firms, big banks, big hedge funds, asset managers, insurance companies, with a very simple, it's an alliance. It's not a charity formally. It's not a commercial enterprise. It's each company pays a small amount a year to join the alliance, and the stated objective is to improve the mental health of all the employees in the firms we are lucky enough to lead. And I must just say that so this was a movement that was started from fairly humble beginnings. Only 5 years ago, very few people in the UK were talking about this topic in general. No one in the city, government, sport, business, politics was talking about their own mental health problems. That's changed dramatically, and just in the last couple of years, COVID has obviously created an environment where it's becoming much more familiar. And then just a quick note that one of the most thrilling things about this journey is that similar organizations, City Mental Health Alliance groups, are now operational in Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, India, Portugal. I think we're going to move into the Middle East and probably into the Americas next year, and all this has been driven by demand from employees and employers. So I'll stop there, John, but it's been, as Patricia said, there are probably one of the last topics that was to be explored in the workplace and by philanthropists and by society as a whole. So I think that I'm afraid that whilst a lot of progress has been made, we're still very much in the foothills, and every day as this terrible pandemic continues, I'm afraid the statistics are incredibly concerning about the brutal impact of mental health on society, and it's not just the tragic suicides that are multiplying across the world, but many people and their families are struggling with all sorts of mental health difficulties that, with a little bit of understanding, a lot of communication, a lot of therapy, things can be done to save people's lives.
I think it's brilliant what you're managing to accomplish. And as you say, a few years ago, this was not happening. So that's the corporate sector. What about philanthropists? Because if you look at charities, in the past, traditionally, mental health charities were at the low end of the giving amounts and stuff. Are you seeing any change in that at all?
Yes, I mean, like a lot of things, it's very difficult to be too general. There are some wonderful philanthropists in this area. There's some momentum developing in the UK, and I've been on this group. I've been kindly invited to this before, John, and I think it's becoming more and more familiar to philanthropists. One thing I would say is that so far, I think it's fair to say that most, not all, but most philanthropists who are passionate about this topic tend to be people who've either had experience of such difficulties themselves, or within their families, or close circles. That tends to be the rhythm of this, but it's a large group. 1 in 4 people during their working lives will have mental health problems. Suicide is the biggest cause of death globally in men between the ages of 35 to 45, and I think I'll just make that point that most people that I've come across in the high net wealth family office philanthropy space tend to be people who have experience of such things.
Patricia, I think you were nodding there at a couple of things he was saying. Just a lot of this is relevant within the areas that you're interested in the work that you're doing as well.
And I guess what when I was just listening to Brian, I just go back to a word like people might be sick of a lot, but I just think there's so much intersectionality between all of these areas of pressure and social, of where we want to see social change, understanding of it, so between gender, between, again, in mental health, disability in general, LGBTQ rights, there's just so much. When we come together to understand some of the real common ground that we have in terms of making those changes and helping society understand this breadth of challenges that the burdens that we all share, I think we make great progress. And I was just listening to Brian and just really knowing and understanding. I spent more than 20 years in the city, and I know those pressures, and I know that world as well. And I just think, yeah, there's a lot we can do if we are, again, I go back to my words of collaboration and cooperation that we can do together.
Yeah, just very briefly, just to follow up on that, if I may, John, I think it's great points, Patricia. I think that it's also worth just pointing out that our experience in the City Mental Health Alliance is initially people and companies begin to focus understandably on those people who are really, really struggling, and then those people who are in danger of struggling, whether it's depression, anxiety, alcohol, drugs. But more and more we're finding, as the conversation becomes broader and a little deeper, we're getting into some wonderful initiatives where everyone has mental health in the same way that everyone has physical health. The intersectionality is a great point. I believe passionately from experience that mental, physical, emotional, psychological health health is all interrelated. So now we're moving from, yes, of course, we all need to help people who are really struggling and try and prevent people from struggling, but also you get into a rather joyful conversations about even those people who are incredibly well and incredibly high performing and broadly happy. There are many things that can be done. Think of Olympic athletes who spend their whole lives trying to improve their physical performance. Why don't individual and companies try and improve one's mental performance, particularly as many jobs that we do in the city and elsewhere are done with our minds, not our bodies.
And this conversation could go on for a couple of hours, and sorry, we've only got a couple more minutes, but Ed, what have you seen from your from the study and from your work with private clients about the key accomplishments that have been achieved over the last year or so, and maybe tied into what's been said already around these other issues?
I think it's really, really interesting, and that word of intersectionality and collaboration and the impact that can be achieved through collaboration is incredibly important. And we're seeing that with, as the data shows, major donors have got the capacity to give, no matter what's happening in the rest of the economy. And what we're seeing is, particularly with the new generation of philanthropists that are coming through, is this desire to have a really clear strategy about their giving. Philanthropy is becoming more of an exercise of being proactive about analysing the problems that one wants to solve, identifying where the influences in other parts of the system, what Brian was saying about mental health being connected to physical health, that's one example. But again, look at other cause areas, homelessness and education. They're all, you could look at any charitable issue and it's always connected to something else. And I think that's what we are seeing with our clients, and we're helping to bring to them, is the ability to devise a strategy that looks at all of the opportunities to identify the connected parts of the system. So having a strategy is about actually having a plan about how to solve the problem. What is the time horizon on which you're willing to spend down your capital? How do you analyze the risk of putting your capital into different parts of the system? How do you use the different vehicles that are available in terms of debt structures or equity structures or grant making programs or underwriting fundraising programs? There's lots of different options. And considering the impact of the capital at all points in its life cycle. So whether it's the investment stage or the grant making stage, we're helping clients.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we only have 1 minute left, so I'm so sorry to say that. So Zofia, I'm going to exercise this. Can we go a couple minutes over?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I think there's some really interesting things coming out of this, and you have innovations like transformative philanthropy that Isa Bosch is doing in Germany. You have stuff that Dave Stephanie's done about entrepreneurial and emergence philanthropy and catalytic philanthropy. So there's some really interesting things about approaches to take. There's also the whole issue of power imbalance and being entrepreneurial, to add to the strategic stuff that Ed was talking about. The last point I would make before I ask each one of you for 30 seconds of final words of wisdom, there's your warning. That is the role of professional advisors. So the private that are dealing with high net worth, ultra high net worth individuals, the private banks, legal firms, wealth advisors, etc. Our research has clearly indicated that if they support their clients on their donor journey, that giving increases quite considerably. And so I think professional advisors have a major role to play in helping to support the issues in collaboration and cooperation that have been mentioned. So final words of wisdom. Ed, do you want to start off? 30 seconds.
I would just continue the thread of the conversation, that this is a space that is far more complex than people necessarily give it credit for when they first enter it. and that complexity offers up opportunity to find synergies between different parts of the system, but also needs to be respected by advisors and their clients in terms of actually, speaking to the people that have access to the data and the intelligence to come up with the plans to make their experience of philanthropy as impactful as possible.
Yeah, and if you deal with a wealthy person's values, their motivations, their ambitions, then quite often you can support them on their journey, whether it's to impact investing or to philanthropy. Brian, what's your final words of wisdom?
I think that, whilst, money and capital is critical in all aspects of this, around mental health, also I encourage people to, use their platforms or their positions to talk about it and to encourage people to be more open. I think a lot of problems can be solved by leaders in whatever field, from being brave, talking about their own experiences and creating an environment where people feel more comfortable. So I think that there's capital in its broadest sense, not just financial capital, is very important.
Okay, thank you. Patricia.
I would just say that in the research that we've been doing into Black philanthropy, the role of wealth advisors was not very prominent, just because they were not seen as being influential, instrumental to values-driven giving. And all my message to this audience, who may or may not be more on the advisor side, is to really invest time and effort into understanding and helping your clients on their values-led journey. Because I think there's that type of stewardship is only going to grow in importance over time. And so I think you will be ahead of the game if you do invest time into understanding what that intentional giving looks like.
Thank you. It's really great. Over 60 of these walk in my shoes since the very beginning of the pandemic. Magazine has grown from 8 articles to over 40 articles, 42 articles on what got decided about the bill. It's the new normal. And if we keep fighting for that, we'll get there. So the old normal, I think, is sort of disappearing, hopefully. Anyway, thank you very much, Brian, Patricia, and Ed. Over to you, Sophie.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. That was brilliant. I really like the point that Patricia made, that now people are talking about things that they never would have done before, and that in itself is huge progress for really understanding the issues we're trying to solve collectively. So thank you very much. As I said, this is our last Walk in My Shoes for 2021. We will be back on the 10th of Jan with a full new programme for you. And in the meantime, we will be sharing lots of the recordings that we have from all the brilliant content we have from this year. So thank you all out there for